Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our annual Wing UK Careers Panel event. I'm going to give a short introduction about Wing before handing over to Hester, who will run the show alongside our excellent panelists, Maddie, Simran, Rioko, and David. Wing is a global organisation set up to promote the education, professional development, and advancement of women in the geothermal community. We were founded in 2019 and now have representation in an impressive 48 countries worldwide with 34 dedicated country teams, which is huge. Our aim is to become redundant, but this will only happen when women have equal opportunities. We encourage male members as well as female members because change won't happen unless we're in it together. And we're proud to announce that as of last week, our male membership stood at 30%, which is really fantastic. We're aiming for 50, but 30 will do for now. I'd love to say we're almost there, but we've still got a long way to go. And as an example, just last week at the European Geothermal Congress, the opening panel sessions on the first 2 days were composed entirely of men. So if you haven't already, please sign up and become a member of Wing at womeningeothermal.org. It is free. Follow us on social media and continue to support and promote each other to achieve a happier and more balanced and diverse workplace in the geothermal industry. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Hester.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and welcome to our annual Women in Geothermal Careers Panel. This year, we've decided to focus it a bit more on how you can break into the industry. So everyone on our panel today has less than 5 years experience in the industry. So a lot of our discussions will be about how they got to where they are today and where they see themselves going. Just a bit of housekeeping. We've got some pre-prepared questions to ask them, but if you have any questions at all, please put them in the question and answer function in the chat. And hopefully we'll just do a live Q&A after we've gone through a few kind of standard pre-prepared questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel. Firstly, we have Simran. She is an engineering geologist and has recently taken up a graduate role at Arup. She works on a wide range of geological challenges and especially geothermal. She has previously worked in the European geothermal industry and remains very close to that. So she's very eager to contribute to a geothermal energy future. We have Rioko, is an energy transition policy analyst in CGG's geothermal team. She joined them in May 2022 after attaining a master's degree from Imperial College London in petroleum geoscience. And she has a passion for geothermal and CCS, specifically that she completed her dissertation on, which is currently in the process of getting published. We had David Walls, who is a researcher and developer of mine water geothermal potential in Scotland. He has recently taken on a role at Townrock Energy to manage their mine water geothermal projects across the UK and apply his exciting PhD research outputs to expand Scotland's mine water geothermal uptake. And lastly, we have Maddie, who is a geologist with 3 years postgraduate experience in the UK geothermal industry and has recently started a new role with the European Geothermal Energy Council as a policy assistant. She's also recently announced that she has been selected by the UK Future Leaders Network to attend COP27 as the UK Youth Delegation Research Delegate. So welcome all of you, and thank you so much for sparing the time to be on this panel today. We'll start off with quite a general question, really, of why are you in geothermal? Kind of what got you here in the first place? So, Maddie, why are you in geothermal?
Well, I think it all started from growing up in Cornwall, really, and being surrounded by the outdoors and granite, and knowing of this massive resource under our feet that is granite and is currently being developed by Eden Geothermal and the United Downs Deep Geothermal Power Project. So I think from a young age I was very climate conscious and knew of this resource from growing up in Cornwall, and I wanted to see the UK really unlock this resource that we have in both Cornwall and other resources across the UK. So that was really what led me down the sort of geology route initially, and then going on from my degree and my placement at geoscience, I've now gone into policy to help us further deploy geothermal across Europe and further afield globally. Have we lost Hester?
It's frozen.
Also, no, Rioko, why are you in geothermal? You've recently graduated your masters, so it'd be great to find out why you're here today.
Yeah, for sure. So specifically geothermal, I got interested in it when I did my undergrad dissertation. So I didn't really know much about it at all. I just really wanted to do something energy transition related. And I got given this topic, and it kind of looked at geothermal potential in the Wessex Basin, which is south of the UK, and kind of marrying that with sort of policy features. So, okay, we have the heat in these places. Why are we building? Is it because of infrastructure? Is it because there's not enough places which need the heat? So that was really interesting for me. And then after doing my masters, I realized that I didn't want to kill any more whales by doing petroleum, but I wanted to do something which kind of incorporated knowledge on like subsurface and the geology. So geothermal was the right fit for me. And then I got this job. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, there's definitely, I think, in undergrad geology degrees, an emphasis on mining and oil and gas jobs on the other end. So yeah, it's interesting you followed that path. Simran, why have you kind of pursued geothermal?
So for me, I think I first really heard about geothermal when I was in my undergrad, and it started when I attended these talks. So I attended a talk on the United Downs project when I was in UCL, and also a few talks from the petroleum industry about exploration in crazy places like the Himalayas for geothermal energy, and it just sounded super interesting to me. I kind of realized that geothermal is something that has a wide range of applications at a wide range of scales, and I thought that it's something for the future, and it's definitely going to be what geologists in the future will be working on. Hopefully, fingers crossed, but that's what I'm working towards.
Cool. Looks like Hester's dropped out,
Okay,
so I'll maybe take over, and maybe Helen might come swooping in a second. So yeah, my name's David, and I think I actually first sort of got into geothermal when I had a school trip when I was 15. We went to Iceland, and yeah, I just sort of had a massive green bus, and we were driving around the south coast of Iceland, stopping off at geothermal pools and power plants and all the rest. And I didn't actually know what I wanted to do when I went to university at that point, whether that was going to be engineering or something else. And actually the idea to become a geologist came slightly later. But ever since I knew I wanted to be a geologist, it was always to sort of come into geothermal somehow or another. And actually when choosing a PhD, I was sat on the fence between looking at mine water geothermal and looking at high enthalpy systems in New Zealand.
Right, sorry, just having to jump on because Hester's having some issues with her Wi-Fi, and I also had to jump onto a call. So we've got up to the why are you into geothermal, and have we done when did you know you wanted to be in geothermal? Have we answered that right? Thank you very much. Who would like to go first? So it's when did you know you wanted to be in the geothermal industry? Rioko, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, of course. I don't think there was like a light bulb moment where I was like, okay, geothermal was for me personally, but I think I knew that, kind of said to my first answer, I knew that I wanted to do something within like geostorage or CCS or geothermal. So I kind of knew those are the avenues I wanted to take, especially because I'd done my dissertation on something which was so geothermal related, and I thought that there was such a need for it. So I think over the 2 years when I was studying, that kind of solidified the route I wanted to go. And then when this opportunity came, and I saw how important it is that you need the policy as well as the physical attributes of geothermal, that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. And here I am. So yeah, quite similar to my first answer. I think they come hand in hand, but yeah.
Yeah, Maddie?
Yeah, sure. I think same as Rioko, is kind of building on my first answer. Yeah, growing up from a young age, very environmentally climate conscious, and knowing of this big resource we had in Cornwall below our feet, Really, it was in college actually that my interest first started properly growing into geothermal when I first studied geology. Studying geology in Cornwall, we had specific case studies to Cornwall, and so we were able to, within that course, study a little bit of the kind of the granite and learn a bit more about this resource potential. And actually, I'm really grateful to my lecturer at the time, Leslie Allen, who she really inspired me, and she made us aware of various different guest lectures, speeches going on around Cornwall. And one of them was Tony Bennett from Aegis Energy, Eden Geothermal. And so I went along to that talk. It was about Eden in the planning phases. And then actually, since that moment, every year, every summer, I was asking, have you got an internship? Have you got work experience? And it was pursuing that, you know, year after year. And eventually the United Downs internship came up, working with geoscience. So really, I think that definitely sparked my interest back during college time, and going to that guest lecture and learning about a project in the planning. And then further to that, I think adding on to David's point about Iceland, going to a country where they're, you know, a fully developed geothermal country, and seeing that in operation, going to my first ever geothermal power plant, that's when it really hit home. This is the potential that you know there is, and this is a country to look up to, and let's unlock this in the UK. So that was really what drove me.
Yeah, geothermal power plants, you go to a geothermal site, it's really quite awe-inspiring. It's probably the only green energy that's quite awe-inspiring when you see all the discharges, isn't it? And it's a really good point that you make there, Maddie, about sort of persisting, that constant, give me an opportunity, give me a position, because somebody will eventually say yes. So it's a really important take home for everybody who's joining us today. David, what about yourself?
Yeah, so obviously, as I just said, the sort of the seed of the idea was when I was in Iceland, but actually coming off the back of my undergrad at Glasgow, I had a placement with Town Rock Energy back when it was just David Townsend running it, and I think through that placement, I actually got to meet a lot more people who were in the geothermal space, and it just kind of finally felt like I'd met my people, and everyone was there purely because they were so passionate about this cause. And a lot of them were climate activists, and a lot of them just had this feeling that they knew something that other people didn't know, and they had the knowledge of geothermal, which they were just trying to sing the message as far and wide as possible. And it just felt like I found a real place for me to fit. And suddenly I was like, okay, now I know that I really, really want to do geothermal.
Thanks, David. And Simran? Is Simran with us?
Yeah, okay, so for me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. No? Okay,
Can
great.
still hear you.
So yeah, I've not been to a geothermal power plant. That would be super cool one day, maybe, like Maddie's done. But yeah, when I knew I wanted to really be in geothermal is when I was looking for internships in the UK. It was really difficult. I was applying a lot, and there weren't a lot of opportunities. So when I went to study my master's, I specifically looked for universities which had geothermal energy research groups and research in that area. And so I was lucky my university, ETH in Switzerland, did have that group, and I managed to get an internship with the Swiss Federal Company for Geothermal Energy. And yeah, I'm really grateful for Peter Meyer to giving me the internship that, you know, enabled me to look at the research aspects and the research and innovation of geothermal energy drilling methods in deep geothermal. And it didn't completely put me off. Like, I still really, you know, it was really a good experience for me. I realized that there's a lot still to learn, and that I would keep on pursuing it for as long as I want to in my career. So yeah, that was it.
Thanks, Simran. Yeah, we're definitely a passionate bunch and a determined community within the geothermal sector, for sure. So, David, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are the favourite, what have been your favourite things? What are the things you've done in geothermal so far that have been like really fun or cool, or you've discovered something unexpected with the mines or something?
Yeah, I don't know how many answers am I allowed. I'll try and stick to just two. The first one will have to be the very first experience I had of drilling into coal mines. It was a joint project between my PhD at Glasgow University when I was there and Tyne Rock Energy. And it basically meant that for 3 weeks we were on site all day, every day. And it was November and December, so it was on site in the dark. You work all through the day and it's sunset by the time you finished on site. And it's because you're paying per day for this drill rig, it's like all systems go. And so I was kind of the project manager / on-site geologist, so I was recording what we were finding as we were drilling into different coal mines, taking note of water chemistry, temperatures, and then just other observations throughout. And all of that kind of felt as if it was the coming together of my hard work for the 9 months or a year lead up to that, where I was putting out tenders for drillers and sort of trying to understand what this project would be through GIS and looking at mine abandonment plans, etc. So it just sort of felt like it came to a real crescendo when we were drilling that. The second most exciting, well, a completely different level of exciting, was this summer I spent 5 weeks on my bike riding through Netherlands, a bit of Germany, a bit of France, a bit of Switzerland, Italy, Spain, and the UK, visiting as many geothermal sites as I could fit into 5 weeks. In the end, I think there was 23, 24. And yeah, that was just absolutely epic to go to all these different either district heat networks or power plants and meet all of these people who are sort of our equivalent, but on the continent, and just sort of driving these projects forward.
And you did videos, didn't you? Are they on Tyne Rock's website or something?
Yeah, so I did an update each day that I was on site via my LinkedIn page, and now a video is coming out through the Tyne Rock's YouTube channel. There's been a bit of hiatus in that, but they'll continue as soon as we've sort of lowered our workload a little bit and have a bit more capacity for making videos. So either follow Tyne Rock on LinkedIn or follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll see those videos come out.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Simran, do you want to go next for that question then? So what's your favourite bits that you've done so far?
Yeah. God, I would say one of the cool things I've done for geothermal is contributing to the Geothermica Sodrex project research with drilling, because I was able to present some of my work in the drilling conference in Germany. And this was also in the Bedretto underground lab, so it's really nice to actually go into the lab and see all these big hydrogeological machines and equipment, and also collecting a few Bedretto quartz minerals, which are really beautiful. But yeah, hopefully in the future as well, many more exciting and happy and fun experiences to come.
Thanks, Simran. Maddie.
Hi, yes. So most exciting things, I mean, my number one has to be Eden. It was, actually, my brother's here and I've just got him to pass me on my shelf with me in Brussels. I have my vial of 5,000 meters down cuttings. That was definitely my absolute highlight of my career so far, working with Lucy Cotton and Chris Dolby on site as the on-site geologist and analysing the cuttings and analysing and observing the drilling parameters, working with the drilling team and on-site staff to drill to reach our target. That's definitely been my highlight so far. It was fantastic to be part of that team. And then I think a couple of other things. I think one thing for me, working on all the feasibility studies that we did whilst at Geoscience, was it kind of cemented to me the fact that everything I learned from my degree, I was able to apply to geothermal. The geophysics, the geochemistry, the structural geology, every element that I studied at university, I could apply to these feasibility studies that we were doing. And then on a personal note, it taught me a lot about the different geothermal resources we do have in the UK, and the different end use potential of those. And then in my position at EDGEC, I think last week was the highlight so far. So we had a week in Berlin for the European Geothermal Congress, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it's the first time that I've presented on policy within the geothermal sector. It's formerly always been from a technical perspective, and now speaking on policy, it was fantastic. And to have all those sort of connections within the industry, both from the scientific community, researchers, policy, and then also industry, the developers, the drillers, we had everybody there, and it was very much, we've all got to work together to really accelerate deployment now of geothermal across Europe, UK, and globally. So that felt really good to be there last week.
Yeah, I'm really sad I missed it last week. Next time for sure.
Yeah.
Rioko, what about yourself? Oh, sorry, Maddie, were you going to say something else? No, Rioko, would you like to go?
Yeah, well, mine's definitely not as exciting as Maddie's and David and Simran's. I'm still a bit of a baby in the field, but I think one of my favourite things so far is the World Geothermal Congress paper that we were writing. Helen, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say because I know it's not published, but the reason I found it like one of my big things is it was doing it at an industry level and working with so many people to try and make a paper which kind of highlights, the missed opportunities of geothermal globally. So, okay, we think that there's heat coming here, like there's a resource here, why is it not being used? Why is no one kind of giving it attention? Why is there discrepancies between other renewables like solar, carbon, hydrogen, all that stuff? And it was very challenging, gosh, but I think it helped my education so much in terms of understanding the difference in funding for different renewable resources, and kind of seeing areas where there was such geothermal interest, but due to policy it wasn't taken off the ground. Like, I can't remember the exact paper, but I remember in April the Geothermal Parliament Post released a paper on geothermal, and the opening line was, "We don't see geothermal as a renewable energy source." And it's like, that's a red flag. We need to sort that out first. And you kind of understand, okay, maybe that's why geothermal in the UK is pretty much negligible compared to places like France, where they have so much funding. It's been going on for 40, 50 years. They actually acknowledge it is a resource. So kind of making this paper, it took us a long time, but we got there in the end. But it's also one of my favorites because at least it's going to something and people are going to read it, and hopefully we can kind of make a change and bring light to the area and get it off the ground a bit more. So yeah, that was for me really interesting and one of my favorite things I've done so far.
Yeah, I mean, that policy paper that we've been working on is definitely, I've learned an awful lot from it. I'm not a policy person. I know it's out there. I know I need to be paying attention to it, but I'm a very strongly technical person. And that was a steep learning curve for me. And you did so much work on that as well. So, but it definitely highlighted some really surprising things that hopefully WGC will enjoy for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Countries as well that we weren't probably expecting to be contenders.
Yeah, so it'd be good. Great, thank you. Right, okay, so we've got a couple of questions about education. So the first question is about whether you would recommend doing a PhD or a master's. And we've got Dave Walls, who is finished or finishing. Where are you up to? I don't know. I've lost track.
Submitting in 2 months, Helen.
2 months. So Dave Walls, who's nearly finished his PhD, and Maddie as well to contribute to that, who's just about to start a master's in, can't get much further away from us, can you, in New Zealand? But so Maddie, maybe you want to go first because a master's is the next step after your undergrad.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks, Helen. Well, I think I'd firstly start by saying, there's no wrong route. There's so many different paths you can take into the sector, and within that, so many different aspects of the sector. It's been really interesting for me today just hearing about all of your backgrounds and how you got into the sector, because we've all come from very different points and working on different parts within our sector. I mean, I've come from a geology background. I studied that at BSc level. I did geology BSc at Royal Holloway, and I then did an internship with Geoscience, working on the projects in Cornwall, and I think that for me that was the best decision I could have taken. I've had a few years there, gaining experience, invaluable experience with the team in Cornwall, and from that I think, having worked in UK in a mature geothermal market, seeing what we need to be able to unlock this industry in the UK, and then also over the last couple of years with the energy price crisis, energy security crisis, that's really what's driven me into policy. And I've been looking at doing this master's now for the past few years, always sort of wanting to gain that kind of, having that experience in the industry first, and that's really enabled me to be a lot clearer on what I want to achieve from my master's, and it's kind of, yeah, narrowed it down for me, and now I'm really sure this is the right thing to be doing. So for me, I think it's good that I had that kind of time within industry first, and it's really interesting. I was talking to someone just yesterday about how my modules that I've chosen have changed so much over those few years. Initially it was all very technical heavy, and it still is, still does have a technical element. I'll be focusing on geothermal technology, but also now I'm doing energy economics, energy policy, also a bit of climate science, and so it's really kind of broadened over those few years. So I think my message there would be not to rush into the next step, and just to gain some experience and a bit of insight into the sector first, and see where it takes you, because it could change.
It's a really good point as well that, you know, you've started out in a very strong technical role. Your undergrad was very much sort of geology and the technicalities of geology, and now you're sort of transitioning, if you like, into a much more business development, policy, legislation kind of thing. And so everybody who's joined us today, you know, don't feel that you'll do a certain degree and then you're pigeonholed into doing an element of geothermal that is with your degree, because you will get the opportunity when you're in industry to get involved with other aspects of the geothermal sector, and you might find that you can then sort of move away and bring your technical skills into something else. And it's really important to have a really broad knowledge set as well. So it's a really good point. David, I mean, you didn't do the traditional role as in undergrad, master's, PhD. You skipped your master's, I guess, and went straight into a PhD. So how did that work out for you, and why did you choose a PhD?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'll just be totally honest. I applied for a master's in Iceland straight off the back of my undergrad, and sort of was quite blasé about it. I thought, oh, that's what I'll do next year, and then didn't get in. And then I was sort of tripping over my own feet going, actually, what am I going to do this year? And so that's when I went to get some experience with Tenrock Energy, ended up taking the rest of that academic year for myself as a gap year. And then through the time with Tenrock Energy, met a lot of people who were working on the mine water space in Glasgow, including the UK Geos site. And there was a conference for one of that, for that I met my current supervisor. And so with a bit of communication with him, we actually put an application together for a PhD. And reflecting on it, I think if you're looking to start a PhD, I would encourage you being very clear on why you want to do it, because it's a huge undertaking. It takes 4 years of your life, give or take. And it's really only you that's going to drive it forward throughout that time. Yes, your supervisors have an input, but ultimately anything that you leave for a week or two, you come back to it and no one's moved it on any further. So it's very much a kind of individualistic work package. And so for me, I thought, okay, well, I've just graduated undergrad. I haven't got a master's. I'll try and get a job in the geothermal industry in the UK, which was effectively non-existent in 2017 when I graduated. And so it seemed like academia was the space where geothermal was a bit more popular and there were a few more opportunities. So I sort of viewed a PhD as a means to, I would say, kill a bit of time, but that's definitely the wrong term, but sort of let me become an expert whilst the industry picked up alongside. And that's worked brilliantly. Now I'm now I would say I'm an expert in mine water geothermal energy, and the industry's picked up to the point where there are jobs in mine water geothermal energy. But the 4 years which bridged that were a real challenge for me, because I do prefer working in a team, and I work really well in the industry buzz, where projects move quite quickly and you're bouncing ideas off other people, and I struggle to get that to the same extent in my PhD.
Thanks, David. And then Simran, as you've done quite a bit of your studying abroad, would you recommend doing either a master's abroad, or even if it's just a year abroad or anything like that, which actually I think, David, you did as well, but would you recommend doing a master's abroad, Simran?
Yeah, so personal experience, I would 100% recommend it. For me, it didn't just broaden, you know, my cultural and personal development. I also got to see different geothermal industries in different countries, and that's how I got into geothermal, is through the Swiss industry. And I would also say that if you are going to study a master abroad, or any master, definitely have to check what courses or what specific modules you'd be interested in, because I took a very technical route, and the reason I chose engineering geology was because I didn't want to be pigeonholed into one sort of area of maybe petroleum or something like that. I wanted to have an open, broad range of areas that I could go into, and as well as geothermal energy. And I think it worked out really well for me. I work in an engineering consultancy which has many different projects, as well as geothermal, which obviously I like the most. But it gives me options, and that's what I liked about how I chose to study. In my internship, I remember that everybody had a PhD, and it was very research heavy. But in the end, I think I realized that you don't have to have a PhD to be in the geothermal energy industry now, and it's not just about research and development, as Maddie is in. It's about policy as well as that. And I realized that from doing some work with the Northern Ireland's geothermal policy with my colleague Madelaine. So it's definitely still like a sort of learning process. You know, once you're out of university, you learn different things like policy, and how that also has a massive impact on geothermal energy project development as well.
Thanks, Simran. While we're on education, we've had 2 questions come in relating to education. So the first one, Dave, you're probably going to be best off answering this, because the question is from Callum. Thank you, Callum. Would you recommend doing a master's in Scotland, or is a more geothermal oriented country, would that be more useful? So from the Scottish perspective, David, what would you think about masters in Scotland within the geothermal sector? Do you think that's an option at the moment, or do you think it's better to go elsewhere?
I mean, it's been a while since I've looked, but I think you'd struggle to find a master's, unless it's a research master's, that's going to sort of really delve into geothermal in Scotland. It sounds like a lot of them are kind of geoenergy, or sort of like environmental sustainability masters that have like a month or 2-week topic on geothermal maybe, and they get some specialists to come in and talk about it. If you're really keen at being solely in geothermal, then I probably would be looking elsewhere. Equally, you could sort of run a research master's and pitch an idea to somebody, an academic in this space who's worked on geothermal projects before, and come with your own idea and say, okay, look, I really want to be involved in hot sedimentary aquifer investigation in Scotland. What sort of masters could I design? And then it requires a lot of background research on your part to come and pitch that idea. But I think probably a research master's would be the only way to go in Scotland, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, David's sort of highlighted a really key point there. A lot of the UK universities are restructuring their masters from petroleum masters to subsurface geoenergy masters. Certainly in Scotland, if I recall correctly, Harriet Watt offer one, because Hester, who was with us earlier, she completed that just a few years ago. But something that's purely focused on geothermal, certainly within Scotland and probably even the wider UK, if it's not a research one, you might struggle to find. We do have another question. It's from Kirsty. However, I feel it's quite a big question, and it might be something, Kirsty, that we email you back on. And it's what are the best MSc courses to undertake in order to go into the geothermal sector? I think we might email you on that, Kirsty, because that's a very big answer because it really depends on your area of interest. Unless anyone wants to drop something in very quickly, maybe. Maddie, you look like you might.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of build on the previous question, and then I think that came in quite well because it's sort of what I was going to say. I think as well as the research masters, I think we've had a previous careers talk that looked at this a little bit. As a person that's been trying to find a geothermal specific masters, it's in New Zealand. There are I think 3 or 4 UN sponsored institutes, geothermal institutes. So there's one in Pisa, there's one in Auckland, New Zealand, which is where I'm going. And there you can choose a specific technology track. And so you do some sort of broader technology modules and various aspects within that, but then you can choose geothermal specifically, and that's what I've done. But in saying that, it's not necessarily the route to go if you want to go in the geothermal sector. Like David said, you've got the research masters options in the UK. As Helen said, a lot of universities are broadening their masters programs from solely petroleum to geoenergy, energy transition. My former university, Royal Holloway, they've now got a masters in sort of energy geosciences, and geothermal is featured within that. And I know Agus Gudmundsson is leading on the geothermal front there, and he's got expertise specifically in geothermal and from Iceland. So you will find those parts of geothermal within these courses, but actually I think the thing to look at is what are the different modules within these masters, because they don't necessarily need to be geothermal specific masters. You know, for example, we're talking about the transition from oil and gas into geothermal. It's because they've got those transferable skills, and it's exactly the same as if you do a master's within that. You know, hydrogeology or oil and gas, all of these various areas, they're all going to give you the same skills as you'll need for geothermal. So I think, yeah, my message would be look at the modules, look at the skills you'll gain from within those rather than the course title itself. And as an immature sort of market in the UK at the minute, we're not going to have those geothermal specific masters, but I think there are some very, very good masters courses that will enable you the skills you need to transition into the sector.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Maddie.
I think I might have lost you, or have you lost me?
Yeah, sorry, Helen, I didn't catch the last of your sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Hey, Helen.
sorry.
I think you can.
We'll move on for the minute then. So the next questions we've got about how you go about setting yourself apart. So Maddie and Rioko, what kind of things can our listeners today do to set themselves apart from the rest? Rioko, if you can hear me, would you like to go first?
I can hear you. Yeah. This is quite a hard question, I personally felt. And I think it kind of has 2 different kind of strands, especially like if you're applying straight out of university or if you're already in the job. So if you're kind of, you know, asking that question because, you know, in terms of interviewing or trying to kind of get that first kind of position in your career, first of all, I just want to say, like, don't feel like, you know, you're not good enough because you get rejected. I've been rejected. David spoke about his rejection. Like, just because you get rejected for something does not mean that you're not setting yourself apart from anyone else, and it's very easier said than done. And I definitely was like in a mood and I didn't get something and I was like, oh, but it will happen. But on saying that, I guess one thing is in terms of like an interview, setting yourselves apart, is definitely keep on top of like up-to-date news. If you can like get in there any sort of recent sources, or kind of, you know, discuss something that's really relevant to whatever you're applying for in the geothermal field, that will really help you set yourself apart, because it shows that you are actually actively looking online and kind of keeping up with everything going on. And also, if you are in university or kind of applying, or you have access to supervisors or professors, don't feel embarrassed or afraid to ask for extra support, because I'm sure that so many people before have also asked them for support, whether it's interview tips or any of that stuff. Definitely lean on them. But if you're asking how you can set yourself apart whilst you are in your job, so say it's your first job, second job, whatever, I've only been at CGG for 6 months, but for me, one thing that really helped was just taking initiative. I think when I first began, I was like, are they just going to approach me, or should I approach them? And I think you just need to kind of take it and just, you know, if you want to speak to a manager and get involved in something, let them know. If you want to kind of network with other teams and see what they're doing, let them know. Just, you have to kind of just bite the bullet and just take that confidence, because even though you are new, you kind of have to look after your own career, and even though you have a manager, you still kind of have to like fend for yourself. So definitely get involved in as many projects and network with as many people as possible, and it will help you kind of grow your knowledge as well. And then after that, you'll be you'll set yourself apart even more, because you have that knowledge from all the different departments that you've been working with and all the experience that you've gathered in that role that you have when you're moving forward.
Really good points. I like the keeping up to date with the news, and sort of, you know, it's not the name drop, it's the geothermal drop, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Maddie, what about yourself? What sort of hints and tips have you got for setting yourself apart from others?
Yeah, okay. So I think building on what Rioko said with the news there, yeah, absolutely. Just keeping up to date with current news. I mean, Think Geo Energy and Asset Eject, we do a sort of weekly roundup news with all the various events and business news, policy news. So keeping up with that is definitely really key. Reading as well. I mean, I've been part of the Geological Society and reading sort of those magazines, things like that, keeping up with news within geology or whatever sort of space you're in within the sector, really important. But also connecting, just get on LinkedIn, get on Twitter, and connect within the community to others. Join organisations, networks like Wing, you know, network within those, build your community around you, and you'll find that when you come to apply for a job, having made those connections previously is going to really help. Yes, and I'm trying to think of, I've got another couple points, but I've lost them, so come back to me.
Oh, David, yeah, go for it, David. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I'm just gonna build on Maddie's point of connecting with people, but I'm going to switch it from being online to being in person. And there's an excellent example of a way to do that in the next month, which is the UK Geothermal Symposium. And if you come along, you'll soon realise that the geothermal community in the UK is close knit, or relatively small. And so if you make an impact on that front, then yeah, you can start to actually speak to people who have put these projects in the ground. And all of a sudden you're getting these insights which you couldn't get from reading it online or any of these other kind of access points. And then from there, yeah, you sort of get extra connections further afield, in North America or Europe or wherever else. So I would definitely recommend, first of all, coming to the UK Geothermal Symposium, and then also being quite proactive about just going up and speak to people, because they are just people after all.
That's a really good point. And actually, you never know if someone who comes along has the courage to just ask outright any internships coming up next year. You actually might get one, because we've all done it. And my thought is, you know, if they say no, you're not in any different a position you were in before you asked them, you know. So go for it. I'm very conscious that we've we're quite close to our 5 o'clock 1 hour, so we'll rattle through a couple more questions and see how we get on. So let's see.
Helen, before we move, I remembered my last 2 points, if I can share them.
Oh, go on then.
It was communication, which I really wanted to mention, because no matter what aspect of the industry and of the sector you're going to be in, you need to be able to communicate what you're doing very clearly and to a range of audiences, using the appropriate language and making what you're doing accessible, particularly in technology like geothermal, unfamiliar in the UK. And a really, really key part of my role at both at United Downs and Eden was communicating education outreach to the local communities, because these projects cannot take place unless the community is on board. And yeah, the education really has to start from the grassroots of the community. So, and this, you know, both in presenting, but also your written work. I think if you're at university right now or college, just take as many opportunities as you can to practice that and get feedback. I think, like Rioko has said, don't be afraid to go to your supervisors and to your you know, mentors and lecturers and ask for advice and try and really get as much practice in as you can when you're there. I think that's something that really helped me. And the other thing, setting yourself apart within the industry, is things like little bits of software you can learn, or just different sort of things like that. Leapfrog Geothermal, for example. We've got Ollie Ward on our wing committee, works for Sequent, and that's a software that they use. Things like that. Learning that, you can do sort of tutorials before you start university, for example, your job, and things like that will really set you aside, having those different unique skills.
Great, thanks, Maddie. So David, if somebody can't get into the geothermal industry right away, what other industries could they go into that might then enable them to move in to geothermal at a later date?
Good question. I'm gonna have to think about this one for a while. If anyone else got an answer straight off the head, then go for it. Yeah,
go on then, Simran.
I do. Okay, so I think the closest thing to geothermal, or it technically is geothermal, is heat pumps, and that comes under more of the engineering side. So if you are a geologist or have a geology background and you think, you know, engineering geology is also something that's really interesting, I think it's a really good way to get into geothermal. There's usually more work in heat pumps, especially I think more in the UK, because we are in an energy crisis and people are investing more in ground source heat pumps at first, and then I think, if you already work in a company, if you can get more of these projects, you build up your knowledge, and then it's more likely you can get onto bigger geothermal projects in the future. So yeah,
there are lots of companies that are sort of either transitioning to renewables or adding renewables into their portfolio as well. So whilst you might not necessarily want to work for an oil and gas company, lots of oil and gas companies are moving into geothermal and carbon capture, and they have big geothermal departments as well. So it's sometimes actually good not to necessarily look at companies that are focusing on geothermal, but actually look at the companies that you might not think are focusing on geothermal, because you'll be quite surprised at what you find when you start looking.
Yeah,
right,
I would second that.
Go on then.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as Simran said, "Oh, you look at heat pumps," then it made me realise that how many different parts of geothermal are also shared with other industries. And for example, my little brother, who's an engineer, he's got a job and he's basically sort of screening areas for solar farms, which sounds completely separate, but realistically, he and I spend a lot of our time looking at GIS maps and overlaying different factors onto it to see which areas are most optimal for each application. So as soon as you sort of take apart the fact that actually you're only looking at the subsurface for specific parameters, then all of these skills suddenly merge into this space that's become really useful for geothermal.
Hugely transferable. So much is transferable.
I'd build on that quickly if I can, Helen. I think that's a really good point, David. just yesterday I was at an event that was run by a solar power group, and they were looking, so we've got within Europe, we have the European the energy technology innovation platforms, and these are for each of the technologies. And so as EJEC, I went along representing geothermal, and we were looking at opportunities for hybridization and collaboration. And actually there are many within solar power, solar thermal. There are already examples of hybrid plant solutions with geothermal, so that is another option. Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's other ways you can move in.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to ask Rioko and Simran. So Rioko maybe for the UK and Simran maybe for Europe, if we can, just very quickly. Where is a good idea to look for geothermal related jobs? So Rioko in the UK, have you got any thoughts on that?
I can probably speak from my experience when I was looking, but the classic LinkedIn. And even if there isn't a job necessarily like advertised in the job section, a great thing to do is kind of look up geothermal, and it always has like people's names. So like if you search geothermal, probably some of our names will come up, and just connect with them. Like Maddie made a huge important point about connecting and stuff. And even if you just start laying hints, you know, they might have you in the back of their brain if they do have something in a couple of months' time. But other sources, I guess if you're in university, sometimes it's easier because you can just like send out an email, ask your supervisors. They all have really good contacts, so definitely use them. If you have left, then yeah, LinkedIn was my #1, but also kind of Indeed, Total Jobs, all of that stuff is very good for UK based jobs. Yeah.
Simran, what about Europe? Have you got any hints and tips for job hunting and geothermal in Europe? Or maybe just locally to Switzerland, where you've been based for so long.
Yeah. So when I was in Europe, Switzerland, I used LinkedIn quite a lot. I found my internship through going through my university. So my university department had a industrial contacts list, and where people had previously done internships. And I went through that list and I found a bunch of companies, and then I applied to a lot of them. The thing is with Europe is you have to speak. I mean, in quite a few technical jobs, you have to have knowledge of either German or French. But there are opportunities where you can, go for English-based jobs, and that's more with international bigger companies. But yeah, and in geothermal, like my colleagues, they were from the UK, some were from Germany, some were from France, some were from Greece. And it was really, really good to have that variety. And I just, yeah, it definitely is maybe a bit harder than the UK, but I think there are a lot more benefits as well working in Europe.
So we only have 5 minutes left. So if we very quickly, very quickly to each of you, where do you see yourselves in 5 years? What is your ultimate career goal? And one tip for breaking into the industry. So Maddie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, in 5 years, I will have hopefully successfully completed my master's, and have learned a lot from New Zealand as a very well developed and industry and very progressive country in terms of things like gender equality. Potentially come back to Europe and help more here with my more developed knowledge in policy economics, but potentially moving onto that global sort of global stage and helping increase geothermal ambition on the global level in sort of our nationally determined contributions and NECPs and things like this. I think possibly on that international stage. And my tip for getting into the industry, I think it's making those connections early, networking, really key, and not sort of restricting yourself to just positions advertised as geothermal or just masters advertised as geothermal. Look at these masters that are more energy transition, geoenergy, and look at other sectors like, I think, Helen, you were mentioning about look for spaces that might not be doing it, but once you're in there, you can diversify their portfolio, and actually perhaps there might be a geothermal group that kind of comes out of that, particularly within oil and gas. And within those other industries, look at critical raw materials, because this is going to be really, really key over the next few years, particularly.
Great, thank you. David, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'll go hopefully quick and cheerful. 5 years, get some mine water geothermal systems set up in Scotland.
Yay.
Straightforward as that. Ultimate career goal, honestly, is not something I've thought about. I'm just happy to be in the geothermal space as is, and I know that because we're in it from the start, then we get to kind of grow with it and dictate the sort of the ways that it goes and where it grows, and yeah, just it's an exciting part to sort of be in that space whereby we can help dictate where this sector goes. So I think that'll change. If I gave you an answer now, it would be different within 2 months. Finally, tips, yeah, like Maddie says, just get networking, preferably, I would say, in person if you can, and just sort of show up with a big smile on your face and start meeting some friendly people who are already in the industry, because ultimately it's people who are passionate about it who have made it work this far.
Rioko?
Okay, 5 years time. Well, I'm actually about to go do a PhD, so I would have just finished that. It's in looking at reservoir quality and applications for geostorage, so CCS and geothermal. So in 5 years, I would have finished that, and then hopefully looking at the career goal. I still want to come back into geothermal, back into energy transition, but like David said, I haven't got like an exact point. But I think one thing that would be really cool is, you know, there's so many targets for 2030, 2050, especially for geothermal world, and I think for all of an age, I will probably see that through. So it'll be amazing to be there and be like, wow, like we help get those targets up. We help get the online capacities on, like using my research or knowledge. So that'd be really cool. And then advice for breaking into industry, I would just say on top of what Maddie and David said, it's okay if your first job isn't your dream job. Don't be like disheartened if you want to be in geothermal and you get something which isn't, you know, directly a geothermal geoscientist or something, because all experience is good experience and it will help you throughout, and you'll probably use the knowledge that you learn in your first job when you get the geothermal job, or, you know, whatever job you kind of see fit for you. So just kind of keep going. It'll be fine.
Thanks, Rioko. Good point. And Simran?
Okay, so yep, I have no idea where I'll be in 5 years. I could be in a different country, not sure. But I do know that I do have a goal to maybe be involved in a geothermal project from start to finish. Yeah, I have a significant impact to the industry. I'm in it for the long run, I think. I don't know, I'm sure I am. In terms of tips for breaking into the industry, like everyone has always said, contacts are really important. Making sure that you go up to potential professors or potential, you know, people at the geothermal symposium and having chats. Yeah, really like expanding your interest in the area. And the masters. Yeah, just make sure you don't have to go for a specific masters. Just I think the modules are the most important thing. It's going for energy transition masters. You know, I have a friend who did it, who works in geothermal, in Iceland geothermal company, and she was more on the policy and economic side of geothermal and energy transition. So yeah, it's a big playing field.
Right, we have come to the end of our hour. In fact, we're slightly over. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, David, Simran, Maddie and Rioko, for taking the time out to share their thoughts and experiences on the geothermal industry and how they've got there and where they hope to be in a few years' time. Of course, I'd like to thank our those attending. We hope you found it a really useful discussion today. Thank you for joining us. The session has been recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube channel, so keep an eye out for that. And hopefully we'll see you all at the UK Symposium, because we'll be there. Need to thank Hester, who has unfortunately been dropping in and out because of her reception, but this is her baby, so she's the one who's done all the organising. And of course, we need to thank Sequence, who are our visibility sponsors, who allow us to use the GoToWebinar platform in order to run these virtual events. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
Bye.